Ukraine is in the second year of its fight against Russia's invasion. But there's another war Ukraine has been fighting for much longer. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has been struggling with an internal enemy: corruption. This year, the country has seen several high-profile investigations. In the latest, the chair of the Supreme Court was arrested for allegedly taking a $2.7 million bribe.
І найбільше викриття найвищої посадової особи в судовій гілці влади.
And corruption at all levels has huge implications for Ukraine's future.
If we do have problems with corruption, it will directly affect our military efforts.
Before the war, that was the main concern of Ukrainians.
Ukraine is the most open and transparent corrupt country in the world.
Ukrainian people have long been demanding anti-corruption measures, and stamping out graft is a key demand for the EU if Ukraine is ever to achieve its aim of joining the bloc. So is Ukraine winning its fight against corruption? To understand the problem, we need to look back at Ukraine's history. It used to be part of the Soviet Union, until the state signed an agreement dissolving the communist state in 1991. The ensuing chaotic transition to a free market system provided fertile ground for corruption. Officials who had made it into positions of power were stealing money and selling public property all over the country, and especially in the East. Over the following years, corruption became a part of everyday life. In 2014, when huge protests swept Ukraine, ultimately toppling the government, one of the protesters' major demands was for the future government to fight corruption.
Before the war, that was the main concern of Ukrainians, probably something that would have brought most of the headlines to whatever's happening in the government.
Pledges to fight corruption helped sweep Volodymyr Zelensky to power in 2019. He had even starred in a political comedy show about a teacher speaking out against corruption and becoming president, before fiction became reality. So how are those pledges going? Right now, there are two main ingredients Ukraine is using to fight corruption. The first is punishing the perpetrators. Ukraine has its own anti-corruption agency, which investigates high-profile cases, and it tries to get them in front of a court. It's responsible for most high-profile investigations, including the ones we showed you at the beginning.
During the last year, even though we had a full-fledged invasion happening, for example, High Anti-Corruption Court of Ukraine managed to still work and produce over 30 verdicts. And we talk about high officials here.
In order to punish perpetrators effectively, the justice system itself must be free of corruption. Ukraine has made efforts to remove corrupt judges and drafted in foreign experts to help oversee the appointment of new ones, mostly via the High Council of Justice.
Right now, we've been selecting the people who would be selecting the judges, because the problem there is, in order to have the trust in the final selection, you have to trust people who select them. We're going at length to ensure that the people who are making those decisions are trusted by the society.
Getting independent judges in place is also a contested issue at Ukraine's constitutional court. The EU expects Ukraine to reform the court before it can join, but proposed changes to the court are controversial.
Now the political authorities, they control five judges of the constitutional court, and there are still five more vacancies. What they try to do is they try to make it in a way that they will be able to put another 5 politically loyal judges of the Constitutional Court. Constitutional Court being totally controlled, because there are only 18 judges in the Constitutional Court, so they will control 10.
Observers say this represents a huge setback, especially as the Constitutional Court will be very influential after the war with Russia, when Ukraine needs to reorder itself. The other main tactic to reduce corruption is reducing opportunities for corruption. That usually means aiming for transparency throughout the economic system. Ukraine has made headway here in recent years.
There is a transparent, digital system where everybody can check what projects are financed, who does those projects, have the pictures and videos of how the process is ongoing, etc., etc., etc. So I think what is good about Ukraine is that we are an advanced IT country, and IT solutions can make the space for corruption much smaller, because you can have a lot of information available for people to look at, available for analysis by the IT tools, available for you to see and watch and control.
With not only investigators but all citizens having access to data showing who owns what asset or who gets which government contract, corruption is much easier to detect. This website, for example, shows how government contracts are awarded to companies with amounts and company names clearly visible.
Ukraine is the most open and transparent corrupt country in the world. We have democracy, we have lots of investigative journalism, and so on and so forth, very strong anti-corruption NGOs. Whenever something happens, the people get aware.
So all these headlines about Ukrainian corruption might actually be a good thing, because corruption is actually being spotted and publicly discussed. Polls show Ukrainians want the fight against corruption to continue even during the war. In fact, it might be too late after the war ends.
The whole war situation and security concerns make it harder to do any sensible reform. But I think there is still understanding that we cannot wait until the end of the war. We don't know how long will it last.
The Ukrainian government is also trying to ready the country for EU membership. And most of the EU's demands for reform are also geared towards minimizing corruption. Many Ukrainians welcome this additional pressure on the Ukrainian government.
Oh, we Ukrainians don't trust our government. We like to control our government. We like to argue. We like to challenge the government. I mean, this is not a question of, we love our government and let them do what they want. I think it's the constant situation of the civil society asking questions and trying to get the right answers.
While Ukrainian soldiers are trying to push back Russian forces in the east, reforming the justice system might seem like a fringe concern. Some worry that highlighting corruption could play into Russia's hands to depict Ukraine as an undemocratic country. But experts also say waiting to reform the country after the war is not an option.
I'm worried about it because during the war and immediately after the war, the authorities concentrate the power, which is obvious. However, after the war, it would be the courts and the constitutional court that would be I would say the main player in this check and balances system.
Important steps in reforming Ukraine's justice system are expected this year, when new judges will take their place in the court system, from the local courts up to the constitutional court.
We need to preserve democratic values in the country, the level of transparency, and all other issues that we want to strive to as a European nation. And for that to be true, to get to the victory day as strong as it possible, we need to obviously address any issues related to corruption and understand that victory is not only a victory on the battlefield for Ukraine.